This is Rugby Unity. I am David Pembroke and Ewen McKenzie. The Lions-Wallabies series is over on Saturday night. A victory for the Wallabies. What did you take out of the game?
Well, I think the right team won. Australia came out and progressed from the second test, and I think by virtue of some of the forced selection changes, those guys all delivered. All the guys who were on the field delivered. It wasn't perfect. There were penalties and errors and things like that due to the conditions from both sides. But Australia made the most of it. They're very physical and played very direct, put a lot of pressure on the Lions and just did the basics better. And, it's the first time we've seen the Lions scrum struggle. We saw the Lions line-out struggle. It's rare to lose 2 second runners in one game. That was unusual, but that's what happened. And Australia were able to capitalise on all of that and make the most of it.
Who impressed you?
Well, the guys that we've been talking about for a few weeks now. I thought Pollard was good. He had good ball carry. Tupu made a difference at scrum time. Skelton was terrific. McReight had his best game, I thought. Hooper coming in. I'm a big fan of his since Eddie started picking him a couple of years back. I think 6 is his position. He was physical and really enjoyed the game. You could see that. And then in the backs, Peach coming into the team, he made the most of his opportunities. So there wasn't much sort of finesse going on, but Australia and White obviously kept us on the front foot with his kicking game. And, Australia were able to put pressure on and got the results of any loose ball went Australia's way. So it was pretty simple in the end, but they did it for near on 80 minutes.
Did you see it as a progression from last week, from the second test? Did you see improvement?
Oh, I think a progression in terms of confidence and the implementation of a game plan that was going to work in the conditions. Some of the selections obviously rolled out as a result of injury. So, some of those I would have liked to have seen earlier in the campaign, but it worked out all right on the night. And so I think that they were disciplined enough. They were more disciplined than the Lions. There was definitely penalties. And the one thing I'll say is I thought the TMO must have been in the bar having a beer or something because he wasn't involved in the game. He definitely didn't get interested in anything. So it was a bit old school. Everyone just got stuck in at the breakdown and no one really looked too closely. So that worked. But Australia put pressure on. They did get the benefit of a yellow card later on, but that's through good pressure and keeping the pressure on the referee. I thought it was a good all-round performance, and certainly a building block. The real question now is you go to South Africa in 2 weeks, which of the players go on? I mean, the guys that I thought were instrumental, I don't know how many of them are available for the next game, so where does that mean? It means you've got to take a step backwards. I mean, Skelton, Tupu's going to France. So these sort of guys, I'm interested to see who's left to play South Africa because you'd think if you could just take that group and maybe play 2 weeks in a row with a similar combination, that'd be a good thing, but I don't know if that's going to happen.
Well, I saw Alan Alatoa, his arm in a sling, so it didn't look like he will be available for the Rugby Championship. I think he's out, so obviously going to test the Australians' depths. But for you, Eddie Jones, sitting back, watching the game, what did you observe?
Well, I was just, before we got on here, I was just speaking to you, and I remember the Lions had their first sort of ruck set up just outside the 22, and the ball went to Toge and he passed to the forward next to him. I sensed then maybe they weren't quite there. Because that's just a hard carry in that situation. Create a good ruck for your 9 to kick off. They did a little pass. It doesn't give them anything there either. It doesn't give you a big advantage in that area of the field. I thought maybe they did have a good celebration. They weren't quite there. And they played like that. Like they just weren't quite there. And Australia, I think, if you look at Australia's progression in the series, the last 10 in the first test, most of the second test and now most of the third test on the back of some really good physical play by Skelton particularly. Hooper came in, as Ewan said. Tupu came in. McReight was good. and they got some go forward ball, and then they were able to capitalise on that. Like, if you look at the first try, Sawali's, seen as a big physical player, and he is. He's a physical beast. But he catches, just shows to the inside, and it just holds Gibson up for that second. Then he's able to accelerate on the outside, and Freeman makes a bad call on the outside, and it's an easy try, in a goal line situation. So there's some nice progression in the team. But the big question is Tupou, Skelton and Hooper are all going to play in Europe. Well, Skelton already plays there, and Tupou's obviously going, and Hooper's going. How do you replace those three guys? Because they were massive, mate. And the conditions in the end suited Australia, but you got to make the most of the conditions,
Who makes those decisions about availability?
Oh, well, it's a three-way thing, mate. You got the club, and you got the player, and then the national union's got to pick them.
Yeah.
And that's where South Africa have advanced their administration now. South Africa have a completely international department to look after relationships with clubs who have Springbok players, and they create good relationships with them, which encourages the clubs to release them, because in the Rugby Championship, I don't think it's Regulation 9, so I don't think clubs have to release players. It's a goodwill situation. And I think, South Africa have stolen the march in that area. And I know New Zealand are chasing them in that area and thinking of setting that up. And I think, one of the things Australia has to look at now is the eligibility of players playing overseas. I think this has really shown, the benefits of someone like Skelton, who's gone overseas, played in a tough European competition for 10 years, and can play at the highest level. And he's probably not in his best condition now. There's another 6 or 7% in him, without a doubt. But his ability to carry through contact, hit at the breakdown, and just put old physical fear back into rugby, and he does it most of the time legally.
Yeah.
He's on the edge of it sometimes, but mate, he's just like a power of force in a team.
Yeah. Oh, there's no question. That talisman, and I think it's obviously the reason why you made him the captain for the 2023 World Cup, because of the way the players react to him. But Ewen McKenzie, what about that thought about eligibility and about the Australian system of eligibility, and Eddie Jones's observation about the quality of Will Skelton? Because perhaps the argument could be made that he would not be the player that he is today if he hadn't had that long-term exposure to Northern Hemisphere rugby. Is it something that you would start to talk about? That's something that you would start to argue for?
I've always been an advocate of, if you go, we need to keep looking in their backyard and keep rewarding the players that are coming through, because we've got so much competition in Australia. We've got to keep finding pathways, bringing the next guy on. It's always been that way. Back in the old days we're amateur rugby league, we're always losing players across to rugby league, and we'd keep bringing the next guy on, and we still were able to be competitive, particularly in the 70s and 80s. I'm probably starting to shift my position a little bit there. I think you have to look at the totality of it. The really interesting point Eddie makes about South Africa and that relationship. Having coached club football in Europe, I understand it. They make big investments in foreign players, and they want them available for the key games. So that's and you can get behind in some of the competitions. Got a lot of teams. You can get behind pretty quick, and it's just a big long slog. So you need those talismanic players to be available. So having massaging those relationships is really important. I worry about is how we lose players. The players just like Carter Gordon we talked about the other day. He drifts off to rugby league. Hooper's going. These guys are going. Yet they were still they're around the edges of national selection. We need to work on the relationship internally, so how we're talking to those players and showing the pathway. I mentioned it with Gordon the other day, the halfback, going, he's in the team, then he's out of the team. maybe he comes back into the team. Well, now he's injured again, but the players have to understand where they sit in the pathway, and then know that if they play well, they get a reward. So someone like Hooper, for me, logically, he gets a go, plays well, so you've got to reward him by picking him again. So other players that are just average or a bit below par, they might suffer at the selection table. We're losing out at the moment because now Hooper, he made a decision a few months ago to go to Europe, when maybe if he knew he was going to be the starting six, or close to being the starting six, but it wasn't clear because the Brumbies were in and out with him in the first part of the season too. He was off the bench and whatever. So we've got to be quicker at working out who the best players are, and there's a skill in that. There's a big skill in selecting and being able to recognise talent. You've got to be able to recognise that and let them know where they sit, and that's an internal communication function in Australia, so that they don't go and get their player managers doesn't sell them off to somewhere too quickly when they're still got. And yes, they can make money. On the inverse, though, you've got Skelton, who was here. He debuted. I was the coach when he debuted against France, and he played well, set up a try. He's gone, but he's now inoculated, right? He plays those British Lions players. He's played against all those guys. And we talked about this the other week about the Canterbury Crusaders. If you want to beat them, you've got to play them as often as you can. You've got to set up trial games, play them as often as you can, inoculate them. So that he's been inoculated against all these players in Europe and some of the South African players as well, because they're in the same competitions. So, I think I'm shifting my position now where we need to be able to extract those players out, but I still think we have to work hard in Australia, being able to work out what the pecking order is. And I go back a long time when Eddie was the national coach. We had a room with a big whiteboard, and we had all of the players, and we ranked on the wall in Australia, in Australian rugby. They're all ranked, and we'd sit in there and we'd move them around. So we were constantly watching Super Rugby and making decisions about what the pecking order is. You've got to be analysing that all the time so that you can at any point in time tell a player where he sits in the pecking order. And that might help him make a decision about whether he does disappear off to Europe. If he thinks he's just going to be a fringe Wallaby his whole career, he's going to go, because conversely, he sees Skelton, who went over there, come back a better player and get rewarded by being a first pick virtually in the national team. So you see, that's a pathway. Go to Europe, come back and be a first pick. So guys that are on the fringe, if they don't understand where they sit, they will go. So we've got to try and manage both ends of it, to try and make sure we've got the best team available, especially because we only get hard games. We play big physical teams and stuff. We've got to make sure we haven't got that many to choose from, especially big physical guys. So the three that we've talked about, Tupu, Skelton, Hooper, that's a big loss, from the pack from the other day. If they're not available in South Africa.
Eddie Jones, your thoughts?
I think, as Ewan made the point, you need a very good centralised selection policy in Australia, and you need to have the states involved. They don't have to follow it, but you need to have them involved. So you've got a clear succession plan in all of your positions, and the players are aware of where they sit, and the players need to be aware of what they need to do to go forward. I think that's pretty important, particularly when you're talking about a small selection pool like Australia has. And then I reckon the other thing you've got to do is then for Australia to play more games, so that the Springboks always play a Barbarians game before they play the Test. But what they do in that Barbarians game is they give those fringe players an opportunity. Like if you look recently, Faf de Klerk's been out, and I know he was told he was 5th or 6th choice. It came through the grapevine because he plays at Cannon. And so he's thinking he's out, but he gets a chance in the Barbarians game, plays well, and then he gets plays in, I think, the second Test against Italy off the bench. So now he's got an opportunity again, and that keeps the players highly motivated. And I think there's a lot of learnings of what South Africa have done in terms of managing their player base, and they've obviously got a much wider and deeper pool than Australia. But Australia can have a really strong policy in that area and maximise the talent we've got, as well as then at the bottom end being so deliberate in picking out the best talent, like big bodies for forwards, talented backs with ball skills, and really try to find those guys and bring them through.
And making sure that you've got to talk to these kids, you've got to talk to them. At the moment, the player managers are getting them when they're 15, 16, they'll tell the player that he's got, all his offers from rugby league and whatever, and there's this imperative. So the parents, everyone gets involved, and suddenly they're signing something. When, if you're in their ear, you've got to give them the option. You've got to let them know that they're an option, that there's an option here. Rugby is an option for them, and then sell the virtues of all the travel and all the opportunities and all the places you can play and the World Cups, etc. But you've got to be talking to them. Otherwise, we seem to play, every time we play now, we seem to play against Australians. It used to be, if we played Fiji or something, there'd be Fijians in the Wallabies and vice versa. And obviously we're playing Fiji. But now you play Ireland, you're playing against Mac Hansen, and you play Scotland, and there's, the number 12's from Melbourne, we've got players that have escaped the system and not even eligible for Australia anymore. So we haven't got that many resources that we can. So we've got to spend a lot of time in that. It doesn't need a lot of people, but it needs a very dedicated focus and consistent communication and identification.
And how
process.
early would you be starting those conversations, you and McKenzie?
Oh, well, you've got to be, when I was at Waratahs, I was signing, you were talking to school kids, you're talking to 16-year-olds and, who are just coming into the first team of their school, and you got to say, I really like your work, and we're looking at you and whatever, and we'd like you to come to a camp or do something. You've got to give them something where they get to mix with people and feel like they're part of the process. And but you've got to have opportunity for them, and then you've got to keep that going, right, until they leave school, and then they can come into the system when they're good. They'll be good enough, and when they're good enough, they're old enough. So you keep going. So. The physical body types you've got to identify. We've always had big, raw-boned second rowers, Tommy Bowman, Warwick War. There's been these guys floating around. They haven't been Garrick Morgan. There's been heaps of them. But we're getting them naturally. They were coming through, but we're not now. So they're getting hived off into basketball and other things. We've got to go in and make sure that they keep coming through, and we keep them interested and let them know. It's just about, you've got to give them a bit of love. And, there's nothing better than the national union talking to those guys, because it makes them feel like they're close to where they'd like to ultimately be.
So before we just getting back onto the third test from the other night, go on.
Pemby, can I just
mate. Yeah, of course.
Just to point out there, one of the reasons why Maxi Jorgensen stayed in rugby was that he went on the Australian A tour to Japan. So he'd been training with the Roosters, and the Roosters had told him he's going to be in the first grade squad next year, right? So he knows that. He knows he's part of it. He went on the Australian A tour to Japan, had a fantastic time because it was, they played a couple of games, but they had a bit of fun, and he loved it. And so that's one of the reasons he stuck to rugby. And that's the advantage of, you need those programs to be deliberately in place to retain talent.
Yeah, I only played rugby in Victoria because the Victorian schoolboys used to tour, and we travelled the world as a schoolboy, and that's one of the things that rugby offers. And then when I was at the Waratahs, we took the players we ended up in Moscow and in Romania and whatever, but they were one-off experiences. But you're playing the Romanian national team or whatever, and we played the Russians, and so the players were somewhere, and out of that, Al Kanar and these sort of guys came out. And they went on to become test players. They mightn't have played 100 tests, but they came on. They became national players, and you found them, and you're able to secure them in that because you gave them. We're in Argentina, and so that's one way that rugby can. Not dominate, but can have an advantage over the other sports, is by getting these players and getting them on a tour or something, getting them playing games in a higher environment, get eyes on them, but give them an experience that only rugby offers, is where you travel to the far, like Eddie's in Salt Lake City right now. You can be anywhere in the world playing rugby, and that's the one thing that the sport offers, and I think that's that's unique, and then you've got to get that out there and show that to them early. So you do have to invest in tours, and you can get sponsors and stuff and make that part of the program. That's an edge that Australian rugby can have over its rivals.
So just getting back to the third test and the decisiveness or the importance of or the influence of that weather break, Ewen McKenzie, how important was that to the Wallabies securing the victory over the Lions?
Well, I don't think, watching on the TV, it didn't look like that anyone had a particular plan. There were a couple of things I noticed. I noticed that obviously the Lions had lost both their second rowers, and I was watching Frost and I think it was who was there was two of them sitting there watching Williams. Williams and Frost were sitting there with Parley, and they were going through the video. Right, they were clearly looking at the line out and opportunities because the Lions were down. So they used that opportunity there to work out, and I think they won every Lions line out after that.
Yeah, that
just took them out of the game in the last 30 minutes or last 20 minutes. They won every line out. So the Lions got nothing out of the line out. So the scrum didn't matter as much. So it worked for them. So tactically they were able to do something. Obviously Skelton and Tupou, they were able to keep freshen up a bit and play a bit longer. So I think there was a few things there, but no, it didn't seem like either team had a specific plan for that period of time. So it was a bit of a surprise, and I think Australia appeared to use it well with key individuals, and it showed in the last period of the game.
What do you reckon Finn Russell was looking at on his phone? Did you see that when he
the dreaded?
He jumped out of it and he jumped into his little section and pulled out his mobile phone, and he started I don't know what he was doing.
You'd like to think he was watching Rugby Unity and maybe he was commenting on Eddie's social media outburst last week, maybe. But I doubt it. I think he was probably distracted. And I don't know. There's we get focused on these things. The media obviously grabs a moment, they focus on that. There's plenty of players that relax in different ways. In the end, you had to be tuned up for when you got back on the field. He would have been tuned up. The problem was the game wasn't going his way. There was no possession. It was all coming at him. And Eddie had talked about that. If we could get pressure on him in the first two tests, that's where it was going to fall apart. That's part of the reason they didn't get into the game. He couldn't get across the advantage line.
Yeah. And for you, Eddie Jones, what did you think about that break and the impact that it had on the game?
I think the most significant one was the ability of Tupou and Skelton to get to about 60 minutes and play another 15 minutes after the break with really good energy. And that made it difficult for the Lions to win. Ewan's point about the line out, I think they turned over at least 5 line outs. It's hard to win a test match if you lose that many line outs. So, there's some good coaching there. The stuff with Finn Russell, mate, you don't know. He might have been looking at video clips of because a lot of the players use their phones now for all their videos. They have video clips of themselves, they have video clips of the opposition. So I wouldn't look into that with too much interest. But certainly Australia looked better prepared after the break than the Lions did. That's the only thing you can take from it.
Yeah.
Now, why, you don't know.
No. Very true. So anyway, but the Rugby Unity reporters on the ground who were at the game, I wasn't able to get there myself, obviously with the weather. But the reports are that at the end of the game, it was quite flat. The Lions fans had sort of had enough. They were ready to go home. The Australian fans were obviously happy with the victory. But it's interesting around Homebush and to compare Homebush to the Melbourne experience the week before. People I spoke to, Homebush is a really difficult place for people to get away from after the event. Very difficult to get transport. The weather was terrible. There's nothing out there. People trying to get back into the city. That experience for the fan that you do have in Melbourne, absolutely outstanding. And so it looks like, the World Cup final will be played in Sydney. It won't be played in Melbourne. And so, again, from a fan point of view, I do think that that's a bit of a opportunity lost for rugby in Australia because, Homebush is where it's going to be and whether or not they can solve the problems. But certainly the fan experience was not what people were hoping for. The ticket prices were still extreme. One friend of mine paid $650 for a ticket to get along to the game. And I just wonder whether there might be some blowback at some point that people have had to pay such large amounts of money to attend the Lions series, that whether or not that you'll get people once, but whether you get them twice, whether they'll come back. But that'll depend, I suppose, on the performance of the Australians. So that wraps that up. But Ewen McKenzie, you speak about the Wallabies getting ready to go to Johannesburg, the first match, 17th of August. How would you go about preparing the Australian team to get them ready to get that consistent performance that now everyone's going to be looking for, to see them continue to improve? How would you go about managing this next period getting towards 17 August?
Well, logistics is a big part of it, and we talk about it, playing at altitude. We don't talk much about that, but it's something you deal with. The question is how much time you spend over there. They've got a couple of games, so I guess they'll go early and acclimatise and make a mini tour out of it. It'll be a mini tour. So I already alluded to the fact that some of their key players on the weekend probably won't be there, but maybe they'll try and change that. I don't know. But you've got the whole series. You come off South Africa, you've got to go and play Argentina. So that won't be easy. So it's a tough period of time. I've always found that Tri-Nations is pretty probably the harder than the World Cup in a way, just the quality of games that come one after the other. So, I'll just be interested to see who's available. You mentioned injuries to Alatoa. We're not deep in the tight end prop side of things. Nongol got on the field. He's a good player, but he's still developing as a scrummager. One thing you know what you're going to get when you get over there. The South Africa have a formula, and so it's a question of whether you can. We were able to put the second shove on our put in and milk the penalty. Right, the Lions did it the week before. We did it to them on the weekend. 100% for sure and for certain, the first scrum of the game where South Africa puts the ball in, they'll do a second shove and try and get a penalty out of you, and then they'll play field position, they'll drive the line out, or they'll pick and drive to the post, and that's what's going to happen. You know what's going to be in the exam, so there should be no surprises. There should be no surprises. So it's just a matter of getting the right combinations. Halfback, White did a good job in the circumstances. Looks like Gordon's got an injury, so maybe McDermott's going to get a belated start. I don't know. There's a few question marks there. Liner, head knock. It looks like a head knock again. So midfield didn't do a lot. Individually they did good things, but as a cohesive unit, the back line still got work to do. I thought in the backs, Jorgensen, doesn't really matter if there's a plan or not. He just goes and finds a try. He's a try sneak. He just makes one up over in his own every time he plays. So he's just going to be out there on the wing and he'll do something anyway. Tom Wright was a bit of a mixed bag, which he can be. So there's still plenty to think about there in terms of selection and how they approach the game. But the good thing is how they're going to come at you, South Africa. There's absolutely no surprises there. It's just a question of who they pick.
What about the management of the players having come off, the series, 3-test series against the Lions?
This is how the season works. Like the European players, they just play every week, right? So that's your job. You play every week. Yeah, it was a big series, but you got to get on with it. You got a 2-week break. That's luxury. And then you're going to play South Africa and then South Africa the week after. You get a break. Then you got 2 against Argentina, and then you got New Zealand. So. This is not the holiday season. It might be in Europe. It's August and whatever. It's the holiday season up there, but not here. You got to be all hands to the pump.
Eddie Jones, your thoughts on the preparation for the Wallabies as they head towards the Springboks?
Well, I'd just say I reckon for a youngish team, it's the best time for them. They've had a pretty tough time over. We know from the last World Cup. Last year was up and down. started the Lions series badly, and they're in a good position now. So it's a great time for them, mate. They should be full of beans. They should be wanting to do plenty of work. How can we build on this? Looking at the good things, right? How do you do more of the good things? Because they've basically played. I was looking at the heat map again. I've become a bit of an addict to this heat map. Because the whole game, like they could have rented out the left-hand side of the field. They could have put flats up there for 80 minutes and got some more money to pay for the development program. There's nothing
good land value in Newington. Yeah,
it would be, mate. I'm telling you, if they had a bit of entrepreneurship, they could do that.
That's what we should do. We'll invent the 50-metre wide field. That'll be good. We'll just have rows of townhouses on the side, one sideline. Perfect.
And I think they've played like that. One of the reasons being Skelton, because he doesn't tend to go the same way from the ruck. He tends to play on the same side. Generally speaking, there are times where he does go the same way, but generally they play on that right-hand side of the field. It's best for the box kicking. And they've got that sort of, that piston type attack going. They haven't been able to, as well as they would have liked. Then when they tighten the defence up, then shift the ball into the left-hand side with bigger space. They were only able to do that once with Swali when he scored that try in the second test. I think that'll be an area because the South Africans do get pretty tight around the ruck. So if they're able to get momentum playing that piston-style attack, there will be opportunities to shift the ball. And Johannesburg is the ball moves quickly there. You can move the ball quickly through the hands as it goes quickly through the air with kicks. And they're generally really fast games there, really fast games. So I think Australia's got the sort of the framework of how they need to play. And now it's just getting the players to work even harder on everything they're doing. And they'll get better and better.
And do you agree with Ewen that you know what you're going to get with South Africa?
When you go to Joburg, mate, you're not going there for a tea party. You know what's coming. I remember in 2005 we played a test there, right? And we talked about the bus is going to be late. The pre-match warm-up, the guys throwing the spears are going to be coming through, and all those things happen. It's like clockwork, right?
Yeah. They've watched the captains run already. Well, they've done everything. Like you already know what's
captains run. That's all. It's all ready to go. So you all know, and the first 20 minutes is going to be full on, right? Where they're coming through the front door, but they got the ability to come through the back door now as well. But they'll only do that selectively. So you just got to get yourself physically right for the challenge, be able to start the game at a high intensity, stay in the game early. Because what normally happens at altitude, you get 15, 20 behind, and it's really hard to catch up because they come out really hard.
Yeah. Rassi will have a few tricks. He'll be watching you, and he'll have a few tricks around the line out and whatever. So you got to be alert. So it's not about it's the pace of the game, but you got to be heads up, watching, ready for something that's different. And which is fine. That's just how you need to approach the game anyway. But it's heads up. You will be sucking seagulls, but you got to be ready. So you got to keep your eyes open. You got to be talking. And the worst thing you do is go quiet and heads down. So it'll be hard work, but there's good signs, So everyone will have to play their best game, but they're going on a tour. That's always fun. That's the fun part of rugby. You get away as a group and do something different. As long as they don't spend their time, going looking at the white pointer sharks or going to game parks and stuff like that and playing too much golf. Like that's one of the distractions. You can suddenly do a whole lot of things you wouldn't normally do in a week in a preparation. So you're going to make sure you do your own personal preparation correctly so you can play your best game and not get distracted by the fact you're in a different environment and all these things are on offer. Oh, let's play a bit more golf. They'll offer lots of things. You'll be going down gold mine shafts and someone will be coming and wanting to sell you diamonds and all sorts of things will be going on. But in the end, you've got to focus on the game.
So how about this challenge of building consistency? as a coach, if you were thinking about how do you get that next best performance, how do you teach younger players to deal with these pressures, and how do you teach them to understand about the challenges, those unique challenges of being in a place like South Africa?
Gets down, I mean, the guys have obviously been there before. We aren't as inoculated as we used to be because we used to go there during Super Rugby all the time. So it wasn't like a foreign experience. This is actually a bit rare. There'll be a bunch of players that probably haven't played there. So that'll be different. So there's a bit of work to do there, but they've got some good level heads. I mentioned Williams before off the bench. Like, he's been starting. Obviously Skelton came in, he dropped back to the bench. He's a really good level-headed, captain from the force. So guys like him dotted in amongst the team, they can just manage the moment. And so you need a bunch of those guys in the team who are leaders without being the captain. But whether they're on the bench or in the team, they make a difference. And he did make a difference in the game. I think he's a really interesting player because he's dynamic. He's not a big guy, but he's dynamic, so he can play like a back rower if he needs to. But he likes the contest. And so guys like that, you just need enough of them dotted through the team. But we don't have the experience of playing in Johannesburg or the other South Africa that we used to have, and that's a disadvantage, because they are unique venues. They're fantastic stadiums with great histories. But before, we've already played there a couple of times in your career before you maybe play a test match. That's not going to be the case for some of the guys we've got.
Yeah, for you, Eddie, that challenge for coaches to build consistency, to make sure the team doesn't go back when they're taking on a challenge like going to, Ellis Park in Johannesburg?
Well, again, mate, we don't know. You just got to keep on training well, keep on painting good pictures in their head. Like, before the third test, everyone's commenting on how well prepared the Lions are, And I'm not saying they weren't well prepared for the third test, but it just shows you the margins are just so small. There's one or two blokes probably a little bit off, and that became contagious in the team. And now they're 2% off, and Australia's like probably close to 100, and you can't win the game. And then now you look like you don't know what you're doing. Like, how many times did they turn over first phase ball? At least 3 or 4 times. It looked like they didn't. And there was once where they're kicking, and I'll guarantee Bundy Archie was 3 metres in front of Finn Russell on first phase when they kicked. So it looked like they didn't know what they were doing at one stage. But they do. But these are the margins. You just got to be consistent, be really consistent. Train hard, train well, focus on your strengths, keep doing it, keep building it. But when we went there in 2003, I remember we only had 4 players that ever played in South Africa. And after 20 minutes, I can remember that game, after 20 minutes, mate, we were shot. Because the altitude's an issue, but the altitude, it's you can recover from it. Like, if you start sucking seagulls at about 20-minute mark, but there's a recovery if you stick at it, right? And when you're not used to it, you think, I'm gone. I've got nothing left in the tank. And then you have 5 minutes where you're off and South Africa keep coming. And then the game gets away from you and you do recover. Like, it's teaching about the recovery aspects. And in some ways, you can only learn that through experience. Like, the experience we had with the Brumbies, how many years did it take the Brumbies to win in South Africa? Well, it wasn't until 2000.
No,
was it?
Yeah, it was about 5 years. About 4 or 5 years before we won that game in Cape Town.
It took a while. Yeah. It's hard work, yeah.
And that's some of the brightest rugby brains in the world, right?
Yeah.
That shows you how hard it is. So, they've just got to they've got to work out whether they go to altitude first, go to sea level, how much time they spend, and then try to inoculate the players against the psychology of the altitude.
You go to that stadium and it doesn't even look like a stadium. It's sort of dug into the ground in the middle of the city, but you walk down the longest hill going onto the ground. So at half time, you've got to walk up this hill and then you get to the top of the hill and they give you a staircase at the top that you've got to go up the staircase. So if you're tapped out at half time for the altitude, they just take a little bit more getting you off the field. So They don't miss a trick. Don't worry about that.
Well, so much to look forward to. We're getting up in the middle of the night to watch those games. So we'll talk about New Zealand and Argentina, the preview that over in Argentina later in the week, but also have a broader conversation about the Rugby Championship and where it sits. But certainly there's a lot to look forward to there. And Eddie Jones, you are continuing your tour of the United States of America. You are in Salt Lake City. What have you discovered about rugby in the United States?
Well, I think, as I mentioned, there's plenty going on here. There's plenty of rugby going on. The MRR is going through a reconstruction. So the Los Angeles teams and the San Diego teams are now merged into one team. And Adam Fry, the ex-Australian hooker, who we all know really well, has now become the general manager. And I actually spent the night with him on Saturday night, and we spent a bit of time talking about American rugby. There's plenty of endeavour, but it's not really ending up in anything at the moment. So World Rugby's got a big task in building the rugby infrastructure in such a big country. You know, they were saying, like, the West Coast and East Coast have different seasons. You know, and to get the players together is difficult to get the players together. And we went to a high school in Sacramento, and they had facilities as good as – this is a rugby team, facilities as good as any Super Rugby team. Yeah, a really good gym. There's great facilities there. But the other key thing that I found out, mate, if they run the World Cup at the same time, they're going to struggle to get any good stadiums because that's when NFL is on.
Mm.
So there's a big challenge for World Rugby. If they want America to work, they've got to try to dodge NFL, which means either having it earlier, which means you have it in the summer in America, which would affect all the European competitions. But if they want it to work well in America, because obviously the facilities like the stadiums and the training facilities that the NFL teams are out of this world. Yeah, and it'd make for a great World Cup. But if you can't use them, so you better get on the Robbo, mate.
Well, certainly. It's there's no question that I think it's the right decision that World Rugby had to go to the United States. You know, it's 27% of global GDP. I think 40% of all sports marketing dollars originate out of the United States. So rugby just can't sit it out at this stage. So I do think going there is the right thing to do. Ewen McKenzie, I'm going to flag it. I'm going to raise an idea in a moment, but do you have any thoughts, preliminary thoughts there about USA Rugby?
Well, I was interested in Eddie's comments because I think I first toured there in 1980, I think it was. So I was played some rugby over there, and then we went through there with the Wallabies later on in the early 90s. So it doesn't sound like, and I've got some contacts there over New York and whatever, and it doesn't sound like it's moved very far. There's been lots of churn and effort. There's a lot of effort, there's a lot of passionate people, but the cohesion side of it across the total country, it just hasn't seemed to have advanced. That's my impression. So I maybe the World Cup might be the catalyst. I think it worked in the women's soccer. They ran the World Cup there, and that did generate interest and got things going for soccer in America. It started to build, so it might be the catalyst they need to have that world stage, and maybe that might be enough. But the stadium stuff is critical. You know, stadium and access to things like this is critical. You got to present. It's got to be presented in a way that obviously you've got to maximise dollars. It's got to look right. And so getting branding and all that sort of stuff, having stadiums that are clean, that you can put your branding up and whatever, is key. And so you've got to hope that's going to be sorted before the World Cup.
So here's a thought. Here's an idea. And so this is obviously Rugby Unity. We're looking to help secure the future prosperity of rugby union around the world, and obviously we want to talk about the game and what's happening in the game, but we clearly want to have a look at what's happening off the field. And the NFL is the giant the absolute behemoth of American sport. Last year turned over $20 billion. Roger Goodell wants to get that to $25 billion by 2027. I think the combined value of the teams is close to $200 billion. But interestingly, during the NFL draft, their strategy was released, or the strategy was sort of being taken about by their senior executives. And clearly we have games being played overseas. We have, this year alone, matches in Sao Paulo, Dublin, London, Madrid, Berlin. They're coming to Melbourne next year, I think, for 3 years. So they're going to continue to take games away. But the core of their international strategy, and it's all of the major American sports at the moment, are looking for international growth. And so the major part of their growth, as revealed by Roger Goodell and his executive, is flag football and the Olympics. And it's going to be in at 2028, and I would imagine with the NFL's resources, it's going to stay there for some time to come. So my thought is World Rugby should enter into some sort of partnership with the NFL, and the trade-off is we will help you come into the world. We have 132 member countries. We will help you grow flag football in our off-season, so you can use our facilities, our fields, our athletes may get involved. But the converse, or the other side of the deal, is that you will help us to grow collaboratively into North America. Now, interestingly enough, I had this thought at the time of the draft, and recently I've come across an initiative by Under Armour with Chinese rugby, which is about growing rugby and flag football in China, driven by Under Armour. They're sponsored there by Ewen McKenzie. So what do you think of that idea? Could we go to the NFL, get Robbo to pick up the phone to Roger Goodell and say, you want the world, we've got the world, you've got America, we want America. How could we work together as a Olympic brethren? We're going to help you grow your sport, but you can help us in North America. Eddie Jones, what do you think? Is there a conversation to be had with the NFL?
Well, I floated it with a couple of Americans last night, and they said, yeah, it's not a bad idea. But when you were talking about that, I thought there's one thing that made me laugh. Who's going to be playing flag rugby? All the World Rugby staff in Ireland. Because the World Rugby's got no control over any national union. They can't even agree on the Nations Cup, mate. So how is World Rugby going to get Australia to play flag rugby in summer, flag football in summer?
I don't know. It's an idea.
The idea is good, but the problem is World Rugby can't get anything done.
Well, I think that's a bit hard.
It's a substantial problem, mate. Well, it is. It's true. It's true, mate. The only thing they can get done is the World Cup. Like they sit on their hands and they set this TMO fiasco. Like as Ewan said, I reckon someone's told the TMO on the weekend, have a rest, mate. Just have a rest. We'll pack it up, have a rest, right? We've had too much controversy. But they don't have any real impact on the game.
Ewan?
Yeah, well,
your thoughts?
Yeah, I think that, I mean, I like the theory, Pemby. You described it pretty well. So it sounded like a really, I don't know much about flag football, but it sounds like an interesting idea. And I like as a leverage way to get into the US, yes, but I don't know. I usually find that the sports, the big dominant sports like AFL and whatever, they don't really like to give anyone any oxygen. So I'm not sure they're going to worry too much about that. I think they'll make good TV rights money out of what they're doing with their little excursions off playing rugby in around the world. We're already doing that, by the way. Don't forget, like the All Blacks go and play Ireland.
Yeah.
In America, they've been doing that. There's been lots of things like that where it's happened. You've had this competition going on in America. I don't know. You've got to get down to the culture of the people and about whether they're actually interested. You would think that there's a lot of surplus players over there that aren't playing in the NFL. Like there's players that drop out of the system and maybe they're not doing anything. So you'd think that's always been rugby. So we'll hoover them up and we'll have a lot of guys that might be quite good at rugby. And that's probably helped. That has happened. But I don't know if the structures are there. We're already struggling now with the test season, whether people talk about having a season where we all play at the same time. We've got this sort of broken, like the Lions have just played 30 or 40 games in a row, and now they're going to start their season again, like it's back to the club season again. So we've already got cohesion problems now that we can't resolve. So I don't know how flag football, it might work and might be able to get other sectors involved in the periphery of the game. But does it help rugby itself? Is flag football going to help rugby get bums on seats for rugby? I don't know.
I don't know either. But there you go. It was just a thought that I had. And I know that there are a lot of structural issues there with getting rugby into schools, getting it sanctioned by the various school bodies, getting it into colleges. Obviously the professional game has its challenges at the moment. But if I was Robbo, I would pick up the phone. I would go and see Roger Goodell and say, hey, Roger, we've got something that you want. You've got something that we want. What might that look like? And it won't be a perfect solution, but it could be the beginning of a collaboration that leads somewhere down the path. Because the strategy for the Americas, the World Rugby strategy for the Americas, will be part of their new global strategic plan, which is going to be released later in the year. So we will see what some of the thinking is there. Eddie Jones is a cynic, Ewan. You mightn't have heard it. He calls it a brochure. We'll wait and see later in the year as to what the plans are. But certainly something's got to happen, and it's got to be done properly, because I think FIFA went there with this World Club Championship this year, and it ended up okay in the end. But the preparation, early days, it looked a little bit shaky. And I think it is a unique market. It's a different market. It's a challenging market. And so I think globally the game has to get together to try to make some sort of success of it. It's interesting, though, that NFL is a derivative of rugby. Rugby was played in the late 1800s in a lot of the universities, in McGill in Canada, Harvard, Yale and other places. But, the game evolved into American football over time. They replaced what was then a scrum with the snap. And they've taken it where it is. So maybe in those somewhere in that history that there's a story to be told. But certainly it's a market that we can't ignore.
There's two parts to it, Pemby. You've got the participation aspect, and you've got the aspirational bit, right? So if you're talking Olympics, you're talking aspirational, you're talking elite, right? Then the participation side of it is people just having a go and getting used to it, understanding the game. Otherwise, you're just talking to people, come and watch something you might not understand.
Yeah.
And then you've got to say, what does the product look like? Can I understand this? It's very easy to watch soccer or AFL or something like that and get the gist of what's going on pretty quickly. Yeah. Rugby's a bit more complicated, and especially with the TMOs and other things getting involved. So I think you have to work out there's an aspirational and a participation pathway there, and you're probably talking more aspirational, and so I don't know how that rolls out. I don't know how that rolls out with the participation. I'm not sure. There's something there, because it doesn't. I don't know if the paths will actually meet. You might just head off like this, but unless they've experienced it as a player, at school or something like that, it's very hard to get people just come to rugby and get interested. Like the game itself's got to be able to sell itself. And we haven't had perfect examples of that to be able to sell it to the world. As I said, Ireland and the All Blacks going there to Soldier Field or whatever, that's been happening. And I don't know if it's made any difference to the enthusiasm meter.
Well, that's it. And I think that's the other, Anyway, we could talk about these things all night. But anyway, thank you, gentlemen, for joining us once again to review and to preview and to look forward to and to enjoy. We'll be back later in the week. The Substack, there is still more content on the Substack. I've got a little bit more information about my idea in America to see if we can get that conversation started. It's not about having all the answers now. I always find take these ideas, push them forward, open up some doors, see how far you get, see what happens, see what conversations can take place. But I think if rugby can talk to the NFL, that would be a good start. Even if Robbo can get a meeting with Roger Goodell, that would be a step forward from where we are today. But anyway, we'll look forward to discussing all sorts of things about the future prosperity of rugby union around the world. Eddie Jones travels safely back from America. You and McKenzie, you keep looking after the cows down there on the farm. But to the audience, thank you for coming back once again. A like or a subscribe always helps us. The numbers have been fantastic. Very grateful for all your support. But if you could subscribe, we would gratefully accept that subscription. But for the moment, please be kind to each other. My name is David Pembroke, and it's bye for now.